Hi, my name is Drew, N1ER or N1er for you ham types. You know, I'm a lot like you. I have things in life that I love doing, and I've discovered that if you find a way to make those things intersect, life is even more awesome. You may think that hogs and ham radio can't go together. Well, I'm here to change your mind. There are other things that I enjoy doing as well. For instance, I love watching my kids play sports, play in band, and live life. I love working in ministries and with underprivileged groups. And you know what? I love Georgia Tech, the Atlanta Braves, and yes, the X-Files. I'm here to answer all sorts of questions and show you how your passions can intersect. We'll talk hogs and hams, but also drink some bourbon and play some D&D, so join me on this episode of Hogs and Hams. Hi, N1er, Drew here again. So today I want to do something completely different than say like a ham radio video. Today I actually want to do something for Christmas. And it's going to seem kind of weird, as I said, it has nothing to do about radio, but remember, this channel is not all about ham radio. But it is something cool that I do as a hobby, and I hope you find some interest in too. So today we're actually going to be talking about bourbon. And bourbon is one of my hobbies. I collect bourbons. I like to share bourbon. I like to learn about it. It has a really cool history as far as like its place in Americana and, you know, just kind of the whole lore that goes around bourbon. So for those of you who don't know, bourbon is a whiskey. And there's certain things that have to happen when whiskey is being made for it to be classified as bourbon. Has to be in a certain kind of barrel, has to be stay in the barrel for so long, has to have a certain recipe. But this isn't a video about that. This is a video about 3 of my favorite bourbons, and then also 3 bourbons that are delicious, underrated, and can be found in most places. So if you are looking for a bourbon to give your significant other, whether it be your wife, your husband, maybe it's your boss at work, anybody that's a bourbon aficionado, then this is the video for you. So let's start with 3 bourbons that are delicious. They won't cost you a small mortgage on a house or a brand new car payment, and you could probably walk down to your local store and find. So first up, I'm actually going to start with this one. So this is a Jack Daniel's Single Barrel Select. And I know what you may be thinking. You may be thinking, Drew, you know, Jack Daniel's isn't bourbon, you know, it's whiskey. It pretty much falls in the whole like bourbon, you know, thing. If you go in and look at recipe and you look at the way that this is made, like it's pretty much going to fall in the bourbon category. And for those of y'all who are thinking back to like, you know, your young days where you're like, Drew, I can't believe that you're recommending Jack Daniel's as like a bourbon. Let me tell you, this stuff is different than the stuff that you grew up on, the stuff that you remember. This is a whole different beast. And it actually comes in different varieties. It comes in different types. They also have like a straight from the barrel, so it's going to be full strength. This is not a full strength. The Single Barrel Select has been like watered down a little bit. This is 47%. But what is awesome about these bourbons, these whiskeys, is that you can, 1, find them, 2, they're affordable, around 50 bucks. And, you know, they're a nice little presentation. Like if you're looking for a gift, a lot of the times they come with these little tags on them. This particular one I got from Reddit Bourbon, a subreddit over on Reddit. And if you're looking for a great place for tasting notes, if you're looking for a great place to go on, hey, what should I buy? I highly suggest the subreddit Bourbon on Reddit. But this one right here was selected by the group over there, and it is a delicious whiskey. Like it's, you know, just some tasting notes that I've gotten off of it. Strong on vanilla. One thing about bourbons, if you're familiar with them, bourbons are sweet. They're sweeter than a lot of the like scotches and stuff. Scotches to me are more peaty, earthy kind of beasts, and don't particularly care for those, but if that's your thing, more power to you. But bourbons are sweeter, and this one is definitely sweeter. I get vanilla off of it. I almost get like a toasted marshmallow. And with these Single Barrel Selects, I will tell you that no 2 bottles are alike. I've talked to a friend, he tried one of these, he got a bad one. He didn't really like it, not his flavor profile. So I encouraged him to try another one, and I think I actually ended up giving him a sample off one that I had here, and he really enjoyed it. He liked it. It got him back into looking for these, and they're great. But single barrels, it means basically that all the bourbon that's in this bottle came from a single barrel. Like it's not blended with another barrel. A lot of these large distilleries try and go for a certain flavor profile. So when you're buying Jack Daniel's Black Label, like it's just a blended whiskey that's just from all different barrels, and the distillers and they're going for one like taste profile. And so with Black Label, that's what you get. With these, it's really like a Christmas gift. It's really like what's in my stocking. You never know what you're gonna get, and these bottles are very different from one another, but they're also really delicious and makes a great Christmas present, makes a great bourbon to share with friends. And we're gonna come back to that here in a second. So that would be my one of my recommendations for you. Second recommendation for you that you can go down and find probably at your local liquor store is going to be Old Scout. And so this is really it's a really interesting bourbon. Like I tried one of these a while back. It's made by it's Old Scout Smooth Ambler. Old Scout, you may see it, and Smooth Ambler Spirits is kind of the distillery that's on the back. It is a delicious, really different kind of bourbon, and they're out of West Virginia. We actually stopped by the distillery on a trip up north a couple years ago. It was pre-COVID, but they put some really good bourbons together. Now I will tell you that they don't make their own mash, they don't make their own distill. What they do is actually buy surplus from other places, and then they age it. They do a little bit of blending. They make it taste the way that they want to taste it. And this is actually a hand select from Total Wine and More. 5 years, it's 56 point, I think it's 9% is what it says. It's kind of handwritten down here, tough to read. But I will tell you, these are delicious. And they can be found on shelves for like 45 bucks, 40 bucks. They won't break your wallet. I see them sitting around all the time. And one thing I will tell you about these. So I've gotten a few different bottles. There was actually one, if you look on the back, it'll say where it's distilled from. And I know it's probably kind of hard to see, but this one is actually distilled in Indiana, which means it's MGP juice. Like if you're familiar with MGP, then you're gonna know they make a lot of different products that are out there, and they provide a lot of distillate for a lot of different places. So this one's from MGP from Indiana. I got a hold of another one that was actually distilled in Tennessee. I thought maybe it was Jack, but it wasn't. What it turned out to be was Dickel's. And if you know anything about Dickel's, like it is a very unique whiskey bourbon. Not my cup of tea at all. A lot of people call it Flintstone vitamins. That's what it smells like. That's what it tastes like. I totally get that. Like I can kind of get that flavor profile, but it's real minerally. And I think that's the water that they use off of it. But I can't suggest the Old Scout distilled in Tennessee bottles. Like you just read on the back like where they're distilled at. But the MGP, the Indiana juice is great. This also comes in a 107 variety, Old Scout 107. So it's a slightly higher alcohol like content, but it also does a lot for the flavor profile. The 107 is actually my preferred off these, two findings. Like if you can find an Old Scout, especially like a store select, any of those, I've had great luck with them. Highly suggest them. And if you're up in West Virginia, swing by the distillery. They sell all their stuff kind of right there in the store. And then finally, what is another good bourbon that I can find out there that's like, it's really good. Like I want something that's readily available that won't cost an arm and a leg. Because let's be frank, you've got bottles of bourbon out there going for $3,000-$4,000. Black market stuff, secondary market, it's ridiculous. But one of the ones that I found as far as taking out on a camping trip, sharing with some buddies at a football game or something, and I know y'all are gonna laugh at me, but Wild Turkey 101. So yes, there it is. I said it. Pound for pound, value for value, probably one of the best bourbons that you can get. And this little bottle was given to me by some friends. They know that I like 101. But this is a ridiculously good bourbon for a cheap price. I think you can get like a 750 for 24 bucks, something like that. It's a little higher. Now, it's 101, so it's a little higher than their traditional bottles that you can get. I don't know what their lower price stuff is. I can't stand their lower price stuff. But for the 101, for a slightly, higher alcohol content, and that's what you get with these slightly higher alcohol contents, is just taste. Like, it's vanilla, you get the toast off of it. Believe it or not, this actually tastes closest to one of my favorite bourbons that we're going to get to here in a second. So, 3 bourbons that you can find, you can go out, that make great gifts for the bourbon lovers in your life. The Wild Turkey 101, the Jack Daniel's Single Barrel Select, or straight from the barrels if you can find those. And then Old Scout, make sure it's Indiana, not the Tennessee stuff. Unless you like Dickel, then, knock yourself out. So those 3 things, great bourbons, great value. They won't break your wallet, and you can go out and find them right now. Which, these next 3 that I'm going to show you, not the case. So you're going to have to dig a little bit more. But let me show you my 3 favorite bourbons. Like, if I could just have something to sip when I'm out with friends or enjoying a cocktail or something, this would be it. And these are the ones that I always look for if I'm splurging, or if I can find at retail. Like, I love them. So a lot of this stuff you're going to shake your head at me about. It is Buffalo Trace. Like, all 3 of them are Buffalo Trace, and I'm not necessarily a fanboy of Buffalo Trace, but I will tell you that out of all the bourbons that I tried, the ones, that I can get, like, if I see these, they're my favorite. And that's just my palate. Not going to apologize for that. That is just what it is. But each one of these to me are very unique and different. All right, so first up, Blanton's. I hate that, like, John Wick came out and, he's drinking Blanton's, because as soon as I saw that, like, in the movies, I was like, well, there you go. That's going to blow up the market. And, Blanton's was already hard to get because it's got the cool little horse on the top. It's got, like, a bottle date, so, people look for it for on their birthdays. Parents get this when their kiddo is born, and they save it till, like, their kid turns 21. It makes great little presents because you can see the born on date. Combine that with now it's famous in movie theaters, and just, like, the whole market blew up. Like, it's next to impossible to find Blanton's anymore. You can still find it out there, but it's allocated. You got to get on, like, a lottery list or something like that. It's a shame, because to me, this is one of my favorite bourbons, and I will tell you why. Like, I could pick this stuff out blind, because to me, it smells like and it tastes like bananas. And there's no other bourbon that, for me, just pops like that. And I've never gotten a bottle of Blanton's that doesn't do that to me. Because once again, these are single barrels, like it tells you the barrel that it comes from. I don't know if it's the mash that they put on them. I don't know if it's, like, the warehouse, like how they do it, the aging. It just reeks of bananas and tastes like bananas to me. And it's a great flavor profile. And a lot of the people, not a lot of people, but there are a few people out there that's not their thing. They don't care for it. But for me, I love it for that reason. It's very unique. It tastes great. And I think retail on these is around $65. If you can find one for $65, pick it up. Secondary market, I don't know what it's up to now. A couple $100 might be able to get you a bottle of Blanton's nowadays. Definitely one of my favorite bourbons. Unfortunately, you can't ever find it anymore. Next one that you absolutely can't find anymore, which is also a crying shame, another Buffalo Trace product, Welder 107. So this, up until recently, I'm going to tell you a story here in a second. Up until recently was my favorite bourbon that I've ever had. Like, it is, it's delicious. Once again, that little bit higher alcohol content, that 107, just gives it that little bit more pop. To me, these are mostly vanilla cherry bombs is what I get off the 107s. I have Weller 12. I've got a couple bottles up here. I prefer this. I prefer the 107 to the Weller 12s. The 12s to me, like, it's oaky. It takes this and it just puts more wood into it. And some people like that. It's not even smoky to me. It's just like woody, kind of earthy kind of taste. It's not one of my favorite things. I've actually traded some bottles of 12 for the 107 because people value 12 more than 107. I don't know why. Once again, you to each their own, whatever. but I've been able to trade one bottle of 12 for multiple 107. So I'll take that deal all day long because this is my favorite. Up until recently, best bourbon that I ever had was a Store Select 107. Weller 107, delicious. This comes in all sorts of different varieties and shapes and forms nowadays. You can find the Weller's Green Label, the Special Reserve. That's basically this stuff, just diluted a little bit more. To me, not as good. Like the Special Reserve, you can just kind of start tasting the stuff, but it really pops in the 107. And until recently, that's as high as you could get, until they release something else, which, as I said, I'll come back to here in a second. But 107, one of my favorites, my second favorite now that I've ever had. And then finally, you won't find a lot of these around at all. But when you do, they're going to be, stupid expensive. George T. Stagg, Stagg Senior, the B-Tax, the Antique Collections, delicious bourbon. But for me, it all comes down to like price versus tastes. Delicious bourbons, but these are a little bit pricier, even for retail. For retail, I think these are right at $100 now. Like if you can find them, so you're paying $100 for this. If you can find it retail, which you're never going to find retail, we throw that out there. You're going to have to find like a friend. You're going to have to go on the secondary market. You're going to have to win a lottery at a store to get this stuff. But what I will say though, it's delicious bourbon. If you're ever in a bar and they have some Stagg, like pours or whatever, try it. It really is delicious. This is a 2018 bottle. They do bottle it at barrel proof. The Staggs, they have Stagg Junior. It's the little brother of this. I think it's just not aged as long. Like this stuff, I don't have the stats on it, but this stuff is aged for over a decade. Super old, super tasty. There are some other, Stagg Junior's one of them. There's some other products that use kind of the same recipe, but they save the best for these antique collection bottles. Delicious stuff. Secondary market on these, $1,000. I don't know. 2021, they actually didn't release any of these this year. So yeah, just less stuff they're putting out in the market. Honestly, I wish Buffalo Trace would put more stuff out on the market. I wish they would get everybody an equal shot at them. Going back to this one, I forgot. Retail on this, I think, is around $65 now. I know they've increased the price a little bit. But secondary, this is even up over $100 like now. Back in the days, like you could find these bottles for $45 easy, and they were just laying around. And then all the hype hits, and you know how that goes. So my three choices for bourbons that are my favorite, that if you see like you can get a pour of, try it if you've never had it. Blanton's, the Weller 107, and then finally the Grandpappy, George Stagg. Highly suggest those. Now, story on my new favorite bourbon that I actually just had this week. My wife and I went out on a date, went over to a restaurant, and I had a friend that actually told me that they had a Store Select Weller Full Proof. Okay. Welder came out with a full proof. It's been a couple years now, but I had not had the opportunity to try one. Once again, non-existent in the stores, hadn't seen one, hadn't really been into any restaurants that had any, but this place had a Store Select. And so I really wanted to try it. And so ordered a glass of it. It's my new favorite bourbon. Like, I wish you could find the stuff. So everything that I told you about the 107, it's just that much more intensified on that Weller Full Proof. And maybe it was just because it was a good Store Select, but it was crazy stupid good. To me, it was vanilla. You definitely got the vanilla. The cherry on it like popped front and center. But for me, it was apple pie a la mode is what it tastes like to me. And that's what I kept telling my wife was, this is apple pie a la mode in like a liquid form. It was that sweet and then that vanilla like ice cream on the back end. So once again, I'll never be able to find the stuff. I looked online, secondary for that Weller Full Proof. It was $300-400. Bourbon's just stupid. going back to those, first three that I showed you, like, there is some nuance, there is some difference in these bourbons, but would I pay $300 or $400 like for a bottle of this stuff? Probably not. I'm not paying secondary prices for bourbon. There is great value and there's delicious stuff on the lower end that you can find, and you can support other places besides Buffalo Trace. They don't have the total market on bourbon, so to speak. They put out good stuff. I like their stuff, good flavor profiles, but this other stuff I enjoy too, and I support other companies. So there's my suggestions for you. If you're looking to get the husband something, and you can find those three, you're on a budget. Those first three that I showed you are delicious. If you're lucky enough to be blessed with money, resources, friends, or maybe somebody that works at Buffalo Trace, I highly suggest those last three, or even that Weller's Foolproof that I don't even have a bottle to show you, but delicious stuff. So what does this have to do with anything? Why are you even bringing this up, Drew? What I have found about bourbon is that bourbon is an excellent gateway to talk to people. I read a book or saw it on a TV show or something where bourbon was created to be shared. So going back to American history, going back to where all this stuff came from, the history of bourbon, if you will, and whiskey, was people had to look for ways to preserve things. And so for barley and stuff like that, the way that they preserved it was through beer. Well, then they found out that you could distill down wheat and some other things, and you could save that, and you could get calories, off of alcohol. Alcohol has a long history, even going back to wine. They found wine and, recipes that are thousands of years old. Like you always hear about, these shipwrecks that they find at the bottom of the ocean, and they try and pull up these wine containers and stuff. But it amazes me just kind of the history there. But for bourbon, it really is about fellowship and it's about sharing. So I have made a lot of connections with friends, whether it be at soccer or whether it be at band or school or whoever these parents are. And, we'll start having a conversation, and I find out that, hey, they enjoy bourbon, and I'll invite them over, maybe to the backyard. We'll fire up the fire pit. We'll go camping. We'll do whatever. But it's basically just a good excuse to sit down and share a glass of something that to me and to others is ridiculously good tasting. In fact, it doesn't even have to be bourbon. It could be Kool-Aid if that's your thing, whatever. But for me, it's that connection with people. You can sit down and you can share this stuff. So like with the Blantons, there are people that I know that have always wanted to try it. They just can't find a bottle of it. They've heard it. They've seen it on the movie John Wick. Hey, what's all the stink and, fuss about Blantons? Well, hey, let me pour you a glass. Let's sit down and, let me share what I've got with you and let's talk. And so that is the to-go nugget for you. Look for anything, and it goes back to that common thread, but look to anything that you have or anything that you can share with someone else to make a connection. And I kind of want to leave you with a story here. So, I started out life in law enforcement. And so I used to be in law enforcement in Atlanta, Georgia. And the way that you build up relationships with your fellow officers is a lot of the times just hanging out, right? It's not when you're clocked in. It's not when you're responding to calls. It's not when you're going out and doing stuff. The relationships are formed on the weekends. The relationships are formed after work where you're just kind of decompressing and you're telling stories and stuff. But that's where you build relationships and you build trust, and you know that your buddy's going to have your back when it's a bad day. And I remember, sitting down, and sometimes it was over a beer and a piece of pizza. Sometimes it was over a glass of bourbon. But just sitting down with somebody and just sharing whatever it is. Maybe it is just the Kool-Aid for you. Maybe it is a glass of bourbon. Maybe it's a beer. I don't know. Whatever it is. Just sitting down with somebody, finding that connection, and then just bonding with them. It is such a liberating experience. It's what I love about ham radio, which I've talked about before, and it's what I love about just a simple, little liquid, like bourbon, the mystique around it. Hey, that's something that I can't find. I've always wanted to try it. Well, hey, I'm more than happy to share. Let's sit down, let's try it, let's talk about it. But I mean, that's my challenge to you, right? Is go and find that one thing. And the other thing that I'll throw out is bourbon isn't made for shooting. So if you've never drank bourbon before, like, you don't drink bourbon to like get drunk, right? You're not doing shots off like, some shot glass or something. If you're doing bourbon like that, you're doing it wrong. The whole premise behind bourbon is I drink it neat, but it takes a long time and you sip on it. And what you do in between the sips is important because that's when you're communicating. That's when you're building relationships. It's not about the bourbon per se. It's about what do you do in between the sips? What are you talking about? And what are those relationships that you're forming? So, just some thoughts for you. I love bourbon. It's one of my little hobbies, and yeah, I love sharing it with people. So now I've kind of shared my knowledge with you. Hope you enjoyed the video. Subscribe to the channel, like it. I'm sure we'll be back with some more amateur radio bits, but definitely kind of wanted to throw out, since it's close to the holidays and I know people are shopping for, those people in your life, my picks for bourbon, just some things. Take it with a grain of salt. Everybody's taste is different, but you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you next time. In one or out.